Exceptional. Back in my stuff.
The Cincinnati Reds gave Hunter Greene a massive vote of confidence and are showing faith that he can take the next step this year. We'll tell you why they did it and why at least one of us thinks it's the wrong call. We've got all that and a whole lot more on today's Aloha Friday live edition of the Locked On Reds podcast. Hit it, Jeff.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are live and welcome into the Locked On Reds podcast. My name is Jeff Carr. That's Stephen Offenbaker, and we are lifelong Cincinnati Reds fans that have turned an addiction to this team into information for you. I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to talk some Reds with us because we love talking Reds with you. We encourage you, hit us up down here in the comments section here on this live edition of the podcast. Make sure you drop a question, drop a comment, drop a thought as we talk about Hunter Greene as the opening day starter for your Cincinnati Reds, because talking Reds is what we do, and we want to talk Reds with you. Plus, Locked On Reds is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day, and on a day like today, we're going to start with that. We're going to roll into some conversation about Tyler Stevenson and the value of the catcher position coming up here in a little bit. But the big news dropped yesterday after a brilliant start, really, for Hunter Greene in spring training. He is going to be the opening day starter, which, may I say, first off, Steve, I was right.
Oh my God. All right. First off, I'm putting a disclaimer, a big, bold announcement at the beginning of this conversation right now. I think Hunter Greene is a great pitcher. I think he's pitcher 1B. He very well could pass the other guy that we're going to talk about at some point. I love Hunter Greene, but I have thoughts about why he should not have been the opening day starter.
It's fair. And like I said, this was a conversation we've had throughout the offseason and through spring training, which honestly, I did think this was a little early for the announcement, but I'm happy about it because it's the Reds are showing they believe Hunter Greene is ready to take that next step. But make no mistake about it, I'm not saying that he's miles ahead of Nick Lodolo, but I see the improvement and I see the ceiling for Hunter Greene, or maybe I don't, because it's way up there and it's super, super high.
So here's the thing, Jeff. The start on opening day isn't really about any of that. Typically, starting on opening day is usually your best guy, but it also has a lot to do with last year. It's usually the reward for the guy that was the best pitcher last season if he's still on the team. That's generally how this goes.
Scott Feldman would like a word.
And if you use that metric, if you use that measuring stick, the opening day starter should be Nick Lodolo. I get that Hunter Greene has the 100-mile-an-hour average major league record throwing of fastballs. I get it. I get that he's electric. I understand that he's going to continue to improve and get better, and mixing in this changeup now, he's going to be pretty deadly to the batters. I get it. But Nick Lodolo was the better pitcher last year. We talked about this when we did our presentation on wins above replacement. When we talked about WAR, it clearly illustrates that over the course of the entire season last year, Nick Lodolo was better. Now, Hunter Greene came on at the end, and his numbers improved, and it was a lot closer than any of us thought it was going to be. But still, it was Nick Lodolo. And I think you have to reward that. I think you have to let him be the opening day starter. And I mean, honestly, I think right now opening day is not sold out. I think that the Reds want it to be sold out. And I think by naming Hunter Greene the opening day starter, with all of the other opening day festivities and the parade and everything else that happens in Cincinnati surrounding opening day, putting Hunter Greene in that spot is the best move for the Reds to try to get that sellout. I think that's really what it's about.
I'd be intrigued, and maybe this is really more of a question for those in the comments section for you guys to have your own discussion. Maybe we'll discuss this on a later show. This isn't part of our plan, but is Hunter Greene the most marketable player on this team? I think there's an argument to be had there. And before we jump back into the Lodolo Greene conversation, I did want to point out, like, Hunter Greene gets it. He understands what this means for him. And he had this to say about it. He said, quote, "It means the world. It's a huge honor considering the history in Cincinnati, the success they've had in the city. I take a lot of pride in it. It's a huge honor, especially with the rest of the talent in the starting rotation." And he acknowledges Nick Lodolo. He acknowledges the history of it. He also had another quote, and I forgot to put this in the rundown, but he talked about, he's just like, we want to win as much as the fans. We understand where everybody is with this team. We understand that, we're kind of up against it as far as public perception goes. But a lot of this, I think, has to do with, they probably had the competition of Hunter Greene, Nick Lodolo in their minds coming into spring training, but I think Greene was favored. And I think that they wanted to see if he had taken that next step with his changeup. And I love the fact that, yesterday it was on display, 4 innings, shutout baseball. I think there was only a total of 4 base runners altogether for the Cubs. And he had this to say, because it's been noticeable that he's worked on his changeup in this spring training.
I want to be one of the best pitchers in the game. As I watch, Scherzer, DeGrom, Verlander, Sandy, all those guys, they take a lot of pride in their secondaries, and their secondary pitches are just as impressive as their high velocity. So I've recognized that. I know that. I'm aware of it, and just trying to build on that as much as I can and be the best I can be.
He knows what he needs to be good. And I absolutely love that. I think that he is an easy guy to follow on this team. If you're a player that is coming up on this team, in this organization, and you are teammates with Hunter Greene, you know who you're going to follow.
I have a couple things to say about what you just had to say. First off, I think the Reds decided that Hunter Greene was going to be the opening day starter before camp ever even began. I think they had already made that decision. They were waiting for appearance from Hunter Greene, like the most recent one, in order to make the announcement. I mean, so that the narrative fits. Now, all that being said, I'm done poo-pooing this. I've said my piece about Nick Lodolo. Hunter Greene is the opening day starter, so I'm getting on board the train. I want the Reds to go out and sweep the Pirates, and that starts with Hunter Greene winning on opening day. You and I are going to have our butts in the seats. We'll both be there. So, I'll be one of the guys screaming loudest for Hunter Greene. So, I don't want to confuse this with, dislike of Hunter Greene. I just really think Lodolo earned his way, but I'm all in on the Reds winning as much as possible. So, go Hunter. What he just said in that clip combined with his quotes about starting on opening day, clearly his head's in the right space. He understands what opening day means in this city, and opening day means a whole lot more in Cincinnati than it really means anywhere else. No other place in baseball treats opening day the way that Cincinnati treats opening day. So I'm glad that Hunter gets it, and watching him work that changeup over the course of the spring, and especially in that last start, I think it's coming together. And I just can't imagine being a batter in the batter's box, having to get set quickly now with the timing rules, and then having to guess whether or not the ball that's coming at you is going to be moving 103 miles an hour or in the 80s. And I don't know how you get your timing. I don't know how you get your balance. I think he's going to be very difficult to deal with for any hitter throughout the course of 2023 and beyond.
I've been trying to find, everybody talks about debate shows nowadays and they want you to be contrarian. And I've been trying to find a way to vehemently argue against you and tell you that you're wrong about Nick Lodolo. But honestly, if they would have chosen Nick Lodolo, I would have supported that too. And I would have said, yep, you're right, because you picked Nick Lodolo. But at the end of the day, both of these guys are just so good. And it's picking between good and great, or great and greater, or goodest and gooder, or whatever
it's
it
A
is.
and B. It's 1A, 1B. Whatever order you put them in, you're not wrong.
Yes, it's a wonderful problem to have for the Reds. And this is why everyone, including you and I, are so bullish on their chances of surprising people this year. As long as these guys are healthy, as long as the top, and I include Graham Ashcraft in this conversation as well, as long as the top three guys are there, this team's got a shot, because pitching is what wins you ball games. And I love the fact too, and there was a little bit of mention, because we talked about him developing his changeup and how, that's a huge thing. We talked all off season. If he could do that, he's taking the next step. But Charlie also mentioned in his article about Hunter Greene that he has developed two kinds of sliders. Wasn't really something that a lot of folks were talking about last season, but that was at the end of the year, whenever he was having that nice stretch where, he's got a horizontal slider and he's got a vertical slider. And then the changeup also breaks differently from those. So he's really got 4 pitches now. Like, we're talking about a dude who's got a shot. And we're going to mention it here in a minute, but I don't know, man. Dark horse for the Cy Young. I like that.
Do you know who was mentioning that? That's very interesting, because if you go back to the interview that I did with Chris Welsh at the end of last season,
that's true.
He said that exact thing, that for a pitcher to be really honed in, he had to be able to throw his breaking pitch so that he had at least 2 that broke differently. That's Chris was on it. Maybe Chris knew something we didn't know at the time, and already knew that Hunter was going to be working on this pitch, because that's exactly what Chris Welsh said during that interview. So I know one thing's for sure. The Reds are confident that Hunter Greene is going to be able to take that next big step in 2023 and become a dominant pitcher in this starting rotation. Well, Jeff, the Reds were also smart to create multiple ways to get Tyler Stevenson on the field in 2023. And there's been some pushback in our comment section and throughout Reds country about that plan. We're going to get into that coming up in just a minute. But before we get to that, I want to tell you about one of the sponsors of today's podcast, Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious treat but don't want all of the fat and calories, then you gotta try a Built Bar. With Built, healthy actually is tasty. Seriously, they're so delicious you won't think that they're good for you. They're perfect for maintaining your diet goals and your health goals, and giving yourself a treat without putting on 15 pounds doing it. I'm not sure how Built does it, but these bars taste just like candy bars while maintaining amazing statistics. And you know how much we love stats here. We're a baseball show. What's even better is they're healthy. With these stats, they're only 130 calories. They only have 4 grams of sugar. So if you're doing the keto diet, these guys work for you. And they have a whopping 17 grams of protein packed into every single bar. And now you don't have to wait around your mailbox to get a box of Built Bars. For years, we've been telling you to head over to built.com to place your order, and those Built Bars would come in the mail. But now you can head down to your local Walmart or Sam's Club and pick up a box today. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart, walk to the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. Just drooling, I said puffs. If you're close to a Sam's Club, run in and you can grab a 13-bar box with some of the hit flavors like brownie batter and churro, which is my personal favorite. Get a box today. You can thank me later. Coming up on Monday's show, we're going to go dig into Reds history a little bit. We're going to talk about how Babe Ruth was almost a Red. We're also going to talk about that and other missed opportunities in time by the Cincinnati Reds, as well as get you caught up on all of the weekend action from out in Goodyear, Arizona during spring training. But right now, what we're going to talk about is Tyler Stevenson, Jeff, because the Reds announced their plan for him very early. David Bell outlined exactly how Tyler Stevenson was going to be used. And it was something you and I had been saying for the better part of all of last season after the injury sidelined Tyler Stevenson for the rest of the year. I think this is how the Reds should handle him. But there's been some pushback, and the amount of pushback has actually surprised me a little bit, enough that I wanted to talk about it. You wanted to talk about it. There's a school of thought out there that by doing this, the Reds are carrying 3 catchers, which means that they're giving 2 roster spots to Tyler Stevenson. Now, if you try and kind of follow the logic that's being presented out there, because they're carrying the 3rd catcher, they're not carrying another hitter. So Tyler Stevenson being in the lineup's tying up 2 spots. I don't know how to do this nicely. No, that's wrong. That's not what's happening. Tyler Stevenson is not tying up 2 roster spots. What the Reds are doing is maximizing one of their top 2-3 best bats that they have. And they're getting that guy in the lineup 5 to 6 days a week. Does that mean somebody else is not playing? Yes. Does that mean that the final spot on the bench that would have been like a utility infielder type guy that wouldn't play a whole lot and wouldn't bring you a whole lot now is in Louisville and you've got a 3rd catcher there? Yeah, that's what it means. But in what little bit of drop off you may get offensively from that spot, you get a dramatically increased statistical improvement from Tyler Stevenson playing all of these extra games. And in game, you give David Bell more flexibility to pinch hit and move guys around and play all of these moving Tetris pieces that the Reds are going to do with their lineup, and have the extra catcher available to make the pinch hit moves and make the switches and not run out of catchers or not be stuck in the 9th inning with, Luke Maile batting when you've got somebody else you can use for fear and not do it for fear that the game will go extras and you won't have somebody to catch. This gives a lot of flexibility. I think this is great for the lineup and for the roster, Jeff. I'm not seeing the negatives that other people are seeing.
No, and I think the important thing here is that, the idea that if Tyler Stevenson and one other guy split catching duties, that means that Tyler Stevenson is coming out of the lineup 1, maybe even 2 times a week. And that is a lesser version of the Reds lineup, because the best version of Tyler Stevenson and the best version of the Reds is when he is in the lineup as much as possible, period. The question for me, and you framed it very well, the last guy on the bench is really what we're talking about here. Would you rather have, and let's use a guy who we've talked about before as a possible dude who doesn't make the roster because of this setup, would you rather have Alejo Lopez on the roster and being the last guy on the bench, with Tyler Stevenson possibly being out of the lineup 1 to 2 times a week, or Tyler Stevenson being in the lineup 5 to 6 times, maybe even not having an off day, but 1 or 2 times a month, and having Luke Maile take that spot?
Everyone knows how big a fan of Alejo Lopez I am. And I say, sorry, Alejo, we're going with this plan, because what you gain from Tyler Stevenson being in the lineup almost all the time is so much more than any other fall off. And, the Reds have now multiple guys that can play the role of Alejo Lopez, that can be the multiple position super utility move around guy. They got a bunch of dudes that can do that now. So I don't think you're giving up that either. You're not taking away anything, really. Alejo Lopez, if he's the last guy on this bench, that's exactly where he's going to be most of the time, sitting on the bench. It's not a needle mover as far as that last guy goes, but it is a needle mover keeping Tyler Stevenson healthy and in the lineup producing. Those are needle movers.
And for me, that's whatever position he's playing. It's not just if he's catcher. The point is if he's in the batter's box. I don't necessarily, I mean, his defense is fine behind the plate. But guess whose defense is also fine behind the plate? Kirk Casale and Luke Maile. I mean, they've already shown it in spring training. Luke Maile's got a cannon. Might actually be, I mean, and we got to see more of this. I'm not ready to make this argument yet, but is he a better thrower than Tyler Stevenson actually is? So you might actually gain something defensively. And offensively, when you're talking about Luke Maile or Kirk Casale, they're going to be better than what we saw last year. I've seen some criticism as well about, wow, they can't hit. These guys are duds or automatic outs. Like maybe if you look at last year for Kirk Casale, but Casale has shown power at Great American Ballpark, lest we forget. And it's not as if that was a decade ago. We're not talking about a dude who's on the last leg of his career. He's still got a few years left in that power. So I'm not looking at this as a detriment. This was for you and for me, probably our most important goal of the offseason for the Reds was how do they take pressure off of having to play Tyler Stevenson, a catcher, every day or every other day. And this is it. And they actually completed a goal for the offseason. I mean, how many times can we actually say that about this team and be, not saying it tongue in cheek? So I'm very happy to see how this has played out. And I think that this is one of the best things that the Reds could have done this offseason outside of, just completely surprise the heck out of us and actually spend a ton of money, which they were never going to do.
I went back and did the math when this news first broke of David Bell's plan, and it equates to Tyler Stevenson catching 40% of the time. He's going to catch 40% of the games.
Yep.
That means between the other two guys, they'll probably split it evenly. So you're looking at 40% from Tyler, 30% from Kirk Casale, 30% from Luke Maile. I'm okay with that. I'm fine with that. But the trade-off from taking away probably 20%. Let's say that Tyler would have caught 60% of the time if he only played catcher. He's going to play now in 85 to 90% of the games by doing it this way. That's a huge difference. That's just a huge amount of games for him to add up statistics and help the Reds win baseball games.
Right.
For me, this is a no-brainer. You have to get your best bat in the lineup, and it just so happens that our best bat is catcher right now. And, I know back in the day, Johnny Bench caught 162 games and then 3 extra games for his church league or whatever. I mean, he was in the game all the time is right. What I'm saying. But those days are gone. And Johnny Bench will be the first person to tell you the physical toll that it took on him playing the way that he played. So, I like this. I am all in on this, Jeff.
Yeah, if you can extend Tyler Stevenson's career at all right now, you do it. And that's exactly what the Reds are doing. And one other quick note, too, for anybody that's saying, well, does this shut the door on Christian Encarnacion Strand making the roster or Ellie De La Cruz or Matt McClain? No, because if those guys make the roster, they're playing every day. They're not going to be the last guy on the bench that comes in as a defensive replacement or comes in once every 5 or 6 days. That's not who we're talking about losing out on an opportunity. What we're talking about is Alejo Lopez, the Jason Vosslers of the world, like guys that you're like, are we really sure that they are exponentially better at the plate than Luke Maile or Kirk Casale? And the answer to that is no. They might be a little bit better, but the Reds are not missing out by carrying 3 catchers here. I think that the Reds, if anything, have found a very good strategy heading into the season. And I think that that is going to play itself out as we move along. But it's just obvious for Tyler Stevenson, for the Reds, this is the best course of action. But I know this, Steve, the best course of action for us is to move into our favorite part of a Friday episode, and that is the questions and the answers. I know we've got some active folks down here in the comment section today. Very happy to start interacting with all of that. I know you guys have got thoughts, and I'm looking forward to seeing the reaction to Hunter Greene being the opening day starter. That's coming up here in just a moment. Before we get into that, though, I want to tell you about one of the other sponsors of today's podcast, and that is FanDuel, because opening day is less than 3 weeks away. Exactly. We're 20 days away from opening day. Cannot freaking wait. Best day of the year. And you can pair the excitement of opening day with making every moment more by going to FanDuel.com/locked on. Plus, new customers get a no sweat first bet of up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. And speaking of your first bet, I was talking about this a moment ago, but hey, a dark horse as far as odds go for the NL Cy Young is Hunter Greene. They got odds on him at 50-1 right now. Trust me, that's only going to go up because we're talking about a dude that's going to catch fire, and I think he's going to be in that conversation this year. 50-1 odds on Hunter Greene. Buy stock now. That's at FanDuel. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet of up to $1,000 in bonus bets back when you go to FanDuel.com/locked on. That's FanDuel.com/locked on to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel. They're the official sportsbook of Locked On. And sports gambling is legal in Ohio. It's been legal for a couple of months now, but the best way to put a couple of bucks in your pocket with Locked On is Locked On Bets. Each and every day, Lee Sterling from Paramount Sports gives you his best bets of the day on Locked On Bets, and that's totally free. Locked On Bets is just like Locked On Reds. It's free and available on all platforms. You can follow, speaking of all platforms, you can follow Locked On Reds on all of them, including right here on YouTube. If this is your first time checking us out, thank you so much for watching. And make sure you drop a comment in the comments section, questions, comments, let us know where you're watching from. Also, make sure that you're following the podcast. Click that bell to get notified whenever we've got new content for you, because as we get closer to opening day, we're going to be with you 5 days a week. We're going to be with you for all the big moments all throughout the season, because we're Locked On Reds every single day, Steve. And they can follow us on Twitter in between episodes. You can follow us at Jeff Carr with 3 Fs. You can follow Steve at S. Offenbaker with 2 Fs. And you can follow the show at Locked On Reds.
Did you do that whole thing without the rundown in front of you?
I kind of did, yeah.
That's what I thought.
I hit Alt-Tab a couple of times, and I got too many tabs open.
It is our favorite portion of the show, Jeff. We are into the questions and the comments. Again, for our audio listeners, most of this will come at you as a bonus episode after this episode. But for the YouTube folks, we'll do a wrap here in a few minutes. For the audio guys, stay here, because we're going to keep plowing through your questions and comments right after we do that audio wrap. So don't go away. So let's get right into this. And there's a great one to start things off. Chad, the quirky picker, was in the comment section before we even started today with this one. And I saw it while we were getting set up. And I wanted to talk about it for just a second, because I think it's a great question. Chad says, attendance at Great American Ballpark has been slowly declining year after year. What are some practical ways other than winning that you feel the Reds could improve attendance at home games this season? I have some thoughts. Jeff, I know, has some thoughts. For me, it starts with the food, man. It is time to overhaul the concession offerings at Great American Ballpark. And listen, we find things we like there, and Jeff is a fry box fanatic, and we know how it goes. But for the most part, Jeff and I are across the street before the game getting tacos or doing something else, because the food is just so much better out in the banks than it is at the stadium. And I know there's a tendency that you want to like highlight your city when you're doing things in the ballpark for the fans, but for guys coming in from out of town, Skyline and La Rosa's is not it. And I want Skyline and La Rosa's while I'm back in town. I go to Skyline and La Rosa's to get it. I don't need it at the ballpark. I think one of the single biggest things they could do to improve fan experience, get more people in, is to make it an event. Be able to come for dinner, come and have your food there, come and, be in the ballpark and have the ballpark experience for a longer period of time. That's the first thing I would change.
Yeah, I know they tried that with like the whole machine room thing, and now that's that MGM Sportsbook, I think, right now. And it's actually Buffalo Wings and Rings instead of like the machine room. It's sponsored by an entirely different restaurant, but that's not feasible. Like, we need something that kind of goes around the ballpark with us. That's why I like Fry Box so much. You can walk around the park and get full eating fry box, but there's not enough of those options. I think that, I'm with you on that. You could definitely expand that a little bit more. I love the beer selection at Great American. I think that for the handful of stadiums I've been to, it's the best that I have seen. And I think that is a wonderful thing that they can do. The 3-2-1 night for me on Tuesdays is phenomenal. Maybe even expand that out, like all weeknight games, especially during school. Like, I mean, obviously it's not a draw for kids, although the $1 ice cream cup's pretty cool. But while school's going on those weeknight games, you can be like, yo, like minor league teams get a good draw for, Thirsty Thursdays or something like that. So do that with Reds games, but maybe expand it out a little bit. And I think that this team is going to get good in the next couple of years, and we're going to start seeing attendance increase. But we've also seen attendance trends be like, okay, you get good, and then the next year attendance gets good. It doesn't follow live with the standings or live with the wins and losses. So they've got to be mindful of that even if they do take that next step this year, they're still not looking at attendance going up for another season. So yeah, it's got to be little things like that. The concerts are nice. I know you have to plan those out way in ahead. It's not like you could just be like, oh yeah, by the way, the Who is going to be here in 2 days. Like, that's not happening. But with the Zach Brown concert and the different things that they do, that's a big draw as well, because I already know plenty of people that want to go to that game. And you can't even tell me who the Reds are playing that day. I think they're playing the Brewers. But yeah, most people are just like, yeah, let's go see Zach Brown.
And then the last thing I think, and you hit on it a little bit, but they need to go get the kids while school's in session. Find many more ways to give away free tickets to the kids, because you do that, you get them to the ballpark. They have to buy extra tickets to bring other family members. It helps boost attendance, but it also creates fans. By giving those kids those ballpark experiences early and often, you create more fans. They will be back, especially as this winning product develops.
Fun fact, one of my memories, if I think back on games that I've been to that, aren't clinch miss or the home run derby or something like that, is when I was a kid, I would believe I was in 8th grade, we had a field trip to a Reds day game, and Aaron Boone hit 3 home runs against the Cardinals. Like, it's just a memory that's always stuck with me. And I think that would be a wise decision, like almost have like a field trip day game or something like that.
I love it. All right, Dave Pemberton checks in. Dave says, Williamson and Weaver have done little to impress at spring training. Who are some other serious contenders for the 4th and 5th spots in the rotation at the start of the season in our eyes, Jeff? And he's right. Neither Williamson or Weaver has really impressed, to the point where I'm starting to get a little bit concerned, because I think at least one of those dudes is going to be in the rotation. So they need to get it together. As far as other contenders, bring me Levi Stout. I think that he wants to,
he got blown up yesterday too.
I know he did, but I think that, if we're going to open up the competition, he's the next guy on my list. If it's not Weaver and if it's not Williamson.
Well, and I think that the 4th and the 5th spot in the rotation are not going to be finished products maybe until the end of the season, and maybe not at all at the end of the year, because one of the things they have to do, one of those spots has to be Williamson or Stout or a rookie, because we need to see those guys struggle. And if they struggle a little bit, that's fine. We cannot be the team. The Reds are not in a position to be the team where if a rookie struggles one time, they send him down to AAA. This is going to be a situation where you have a long reliever ready. Maybe that's Luis Sessa. Maybe that's Connor Overton, that whenever Brandon Williamson blows up early in a game and you just got to get him out of there for his own psyche, then you throw in one of those guys. You can't take them out of the rotation simply because they've had a bad spring. And no, I'm not encouraged by what I've seen from the numbers on Williamson, but there's definitely moments that I see, okay, if he can build on that moment, if he can take that pitch, if he can take that at bat and build it out into an actual appearance, or 4 or 5 innings, something like that, then we're talking about cooking with gas. I think overall we've got to be very patient with Williamson, with Stout, maybe later on in the season with Andrew Abbott, because we're going to see good times and we're going to see bad times, but we got to live with both of them.
You mentioned Connor Overton, and we're going to talk about him for the audio folks at the beginning of your bonus episode feed, coming up right after this show. And for the YouTube folks, stay right here. We're going to talk about Connor Overton right after we wrap this up. For the audio show, that's going to do it for this edition of Locked on Reds. Coming up on Monday, we're going to be talking about the ghosts of Reds transactions past and how they could have had Babe Ruth. Plus, we're going to catch you up on all of the spring training action from out in Goodyear. Thanks for making Locked On Reds your first listen. Now go make Locked On Fantasy Baseball your second listen. You can win your league by listening to Matt and Dom every day as they bring you the best fantasy draft strategies and coverage. You can find Locked On Fantasy Baseball wherever you get your podcasts, just like Locked On Reds. And they are also available on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As far as me and Jeff go, we're going to keep scouring the transactions, the rumors, and the waivers, and we will report back to you and keep you locked on Reds every single day. All right, Jeff, you mentioned Connor Overton, and I have not, and this has been a point of pride for me because I have not mentioned him in a fourth or fifth starting role. I've always relegated him to the bullpen as the long man since the end of last season. But given the performances of everybody else throughout spring training, does this open the door for him to slide in and grab a rotation spot I mean, this is what I'm setting up. Could we see both Williamson and Stout at AAA to work on some things and have the fourth and fifth guys be Weaver and Overton? That's the question I'm asking you.
It's definitely possible. I mean, Overton's not been impressive this spring either, and he is due to pitch here in about an hour against the Mariners, but he's going to be the starting pitcher at least. So I wonder if they let him go 3 or 4 innings or something like that, or, how many batters he gets to face based on his performance. But I almost wonder, and this could be an interesting opportunity for them to do this, to carry Weaver, Sessa, Overton all on the roster and have them in the bullpen, and Sessa can be, if it's a tight game, he can come in the 8th, or if it's a struggle, he can come in the 2nd or the 3rd and pitch multiple innings. Same with Connor Overton, because Luke Weaver has shown a propensity to blow up. Brandon Williamson, Levi Stout have shown propensities to blow up, but they've also had nice stretches as well. So maybe they do that for 2 or 3 innings. They get to the point where they almost blow up. David Bell throws in Connor Overton, Luis Sessa shuts the door for a couple more innings to get it to the actual bullpen plan for the day. I think that the best version of the Reds is understanding that those 2 rotation spots are going to be very volatile and not expecting either spot to go 6 innings every 5th day.
So almost a piggyback format, basically, is what you're describing.
Mm-hmm. Because right. I think there's a little bit, and people always hate it when you say this about a rookie coming up because they just want the rookies to go out there and throw 8 shutout innings and just impress us every time out. But if you have a plan, for failure, not to say that you want it to be failure, but if you're planning
plan for the worst and hope for the best.
Yeah. And piggyback starting is the way to ease those guys into it.
So let's loop back through some of these comments, Jeff. Not all of them will require a lot of time from me and you, but I do want to acknowledge them. As we were talking throughout the first 2 segments of the show, there were some folks checking in. So Dragon says Hunter is the best polished face of the team, more of a speaker. That's true. I mean, if you figure the opening day guy is going to have to talk to the media a lot and be, kind of a face of the franchise, I mean, Hunter Greene's good at that. And, as we saw from those quotes and from his video, he knows exactly what to say and how to deliver the message. So I can see that. Jimmy says, Greene's a PR move. Yeah, there's some that all ties together. And I don't blame the Reds for allowing that to factor into their decision. I really don't. Josh thinks Lodolo should be the opening day starter. I do. I think that too.
And I think it's interesting and important to note when you're talking about the opening day starter, there's a little bit of theatrics when it comes along with that, because as we talked about in the past, there's a difference between saying that a guy is the opening day starter and a guy is the guy for game 7 of the World Series. There's a huge difference there. And I think that, Hunter Greene is still building to that point, and that's why I say the Reds are showing confidence that he can get there, because opening day is a little bit more PR than the playoffs are. Playoffs, you want the guy that is going to take over.
Scott checks in and says, how many lefties will be in the starting rotation? Well, we know Nick Lodolo is one of them.
Brandon Williamson will be the other.
You really think are you
I'm
calling it right
confident
now?
he's going to
Is he
break
going to
opening
be your
day
fifth guy?
I think so. I think there is a non-zero chance that it is Weaver and Overton, but I think that Brandon Williamson's going to be the fifth starter.
Dave Pemberton says if CES isn't on the opening day roster and in the lineup, we riot. Listen, they're so much fun right now. I mean,
They are.
They're just so much fun. I
And
mean,
I
I have a hard time not like overhyping this.
Yeah, like copy paste the fun we're having now in spring training into the regular season, and you will see more people at the ballpark. Like I feel like the Reds have to take that into consideration. Like nobody is showing up to the ballpark because they're happy that Will Myers is starting at first and they're going to see TJ Friedel in right field because Will Myers is at first. Like we want to see CES at first. We want to see Matt McClain somewhere in the field. We want to see the young guys. We want to see Ellie De La Cruz. And I know that he hasn't had the inspiring spring that those two guys have had, but that doesn't change my opinion of him any bit at all. And I would love to see CES on this opening day roster because he's going to be so much fun to watch. A Great American. That power.
BR7 checks in and says, if Joey comes back and does not knock the lights out, will fans start a slow roar for CES? This is an interesting question, Jeff. I think there is a little corner of the fan base that will do exactly this.
Hot take. Even if he does knock the cover off the ball, I want him to play DH and I want CES at first.
Well, hello. You're
like
we're moving. So Joey as the full-time DH is what you're calling for right now. You've seen enough. You've seen enough of CES to say, Joey Votto, you just lost your job. You're now just going to hit. We're bringing up the kids.
I think that there's an argument to be had about it, at least to be like, especially if it's a right-handed pitcher, you could say, okay, Joey could play first. But if it's a left-handed pitcher, there's consideration to be had that CES needs to be the right-handed part of a platoon at first base.
Oh, that is definitely a hot take. I'm not there with you yet. I want to see what Joey brings to the table when he comes back. If he is the comeback player of the year, Joey, that we hope he will be, then I want him at first base part of the time. I want him at DH part of the time, basically trading out with Tyler Stevenson. We've talked about this.
Yeah.
That's how I want to see him used. If Joey's, to answer the question though, if Joey is not comeback player of the year, Joey, let's just say, Father Time finally wins coming off of this type of injury and Joey's not Joey. Joey's already said he'll be the first one to acknowledge that. And he doesn't want to play if he's not good. If he's not Joey, he doesn't want to play. So I imagine if he struggles mightily and can't get it together, he'll at some point announce that this is going to be it for him. And then it's going to be the Joey Votto goodbye tour. And I don't think people are going to give him a hard time in that scenario. They're going to cheer him, and the places they go visit will give him gifts, and he's going to get, a send off that he deserves. So I think either way, I think the fan base will be nice to him. It'll either be because he's overachieving and being the comeback player of the year, or it's because they know this is the last they're ever going to get to see of what is the Reds' last career Hall of Fame player.
I wonder, and this is really more of a, let's talk about it hypothetically for just a moment instead of do we have a concrete answer on this? But Joey almost seems like the personality of a guy, because like we heard about Albert Pujols contemplating retirement in June before he took off last season. They're in the story that we'll talk about on Monday about Babe Ruth. When he retired, he played 28 games in 1935 and he was hitting like $118. He only had like 8 homers and he's just like, yeah, I'm not good anymore. I'm done. And he stopped. He didn't travel with the team the rest of the year. He retired. Could Joey do that? Could Joey be like, look, this isn't working, guys. I need to peace out. And you guys got a ton of talent on this roster. I'm done. Maybe he does travel with the team as kind of just like a advisory coach, but I could see there being a possibility that he's just like, no, I'm hanging it up and this is my last game.
Kind of a la Ken Griffey Jr., right?
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly how Griffey went out. And he was like, nah, I'm done. And he was done that day. Dave Brown, check this out. This is an interesting comment, and I'll frame it up for you, Jeff, because I want to get your thoughts. Dave Brown says, if Greene doesn't have it in any particular start, he cannot pitch through it. Lodolo knows how to pitch through a bad day and how to keep his team in a game. This feels like that meltdown conversation that we had when we were talking about arbitration with Tampa Bay, and that they brought out this meltdown stat. And I wonder if that has some kind of play here. But do you agree with this take? Do you feel like Lodolo's better at finding his way through trouble, and that when Hunter Greene melts down, it's just beyond repair?
I think, okay, to his point, I think we know that about Nick Lodolo, that he can fight through trouble. I don't think we know that about Hunter Greene. I think early season Hunter Greene, yeah, sure, I agree with him. He couldn't fight through a meltdown then. His last 8 starts of the year, though, last year, he had a 1.75 ERA. And those were 8 starts. It's a small sample, but you're not going to tell me that 8 starts in a row he didn't face any adversity whatsoever. Like, he was really good in that season. And I think that there's an argument to be had that we still don't necessarily know what we don't know about Hunter Greene. So I'm not willing to say that I know he can't fight through a meltdown, because as far as maturity goes, and as far as like just overall smarts, and I think he's probably a tops on the team.
Yeah, I can't say it better than you did. I think that's exactly how I feel. I agree with that. There's great Nick Lodolo and Hunter Greene talk in the chat throughout this whole time. Jeff, I'm gonna take a couple more and then we'll move into Tyler Stevenson and then the odds and ends stuff. But comment here from Back says, I think the addition of the second slider and changeup, the long ball will be reduced. Hitters just can't think, okay, fastball or slider. That is what we talked about, right? You know, basically the hitters had a 50-50 shot of guessing it right. And then, you know, if they were able to guess correctly, as Back says here, they could sit on one. Greene will be dominant this season. But from your lips to God's ears, my friend, that's exactly what we hope happens.
I think too, and it's something that he did to very good success yesterday in that 4-inning outing against the Cubs, is that he ran that changeup up there to get a ground ball. He wasn't necessarily pitching the changeup to get a whiff, but he was able to drop it in right underneath the bat. Guys were not making good contact on it. It was a lot of weak grounders. I think there was that one weird base hit that Trey Mancini had where it was just, he dropped the ball in no man's land right there on the infield grass. And Hunter Greene almost made a play on it, like almost made a super athletic looking play, just couldn't quite get him because it was too awkward of an angle and all this other stuff. But I think at the end of the day, we talked about this a lot last year, in that it seemed like every pitch was trying to get a strikeout. And when he didn't get that, he was giving up a lot of hard contact. Now he's got a couple of pitches between the second slider and the changeup that he can just drop in and be like, look, I need to get out of this at bat. I need to get an out and let's move on to the next guy, because this guy's got my fastball timed, or he's got my whiff, you know, his slider for a swing and miss. He's got that figured out. So let's just get out of it, get an out, and get moving, because that is something he did not have in the first half of last season, because there's a lot of long at bats, right? He was trying to get the strikeout. Now he can just say, all right, boom, we're going to cut this off early, ground you to third, get you out of here. Let's move on to the next guy.
Well, speaking of moving on to the next one, let's get into some Tyler Stevenson talk. We're going to continue to talk about this pitching, guys. Don't worry. We'll have you covered all the rest of spring, especially now that whatever Hunter Greene does the rest of the way, it's going to be under a microscope as he prepares for the opening day start. Sure. Greg checks in and says Tyler Stevenson needs to be in the lineup, ideally at catcher, but realistically anywhere is better than the injured list. His bat must be in the lineup. I totally agree with that. Before we talk about that, I'm going to jump into Debbie Brown's comment because I want to tie them together. Debbie says they have to move Tyler around. He's just too accident prone. So let's take these two comments in conjunction, Jeff, because I agree, Greg, his bat must be in the lineup. That's what we're saying. Having him in the lineup at any position is a benefit to the team because of that bat. I like that he's still catching 40% of the time. To Debbie Brown's point that he's accident prone. Nick Senzel is accident prone. We've seen that over a large sample size. Tyler Stevenson had a couple fluke injuries. A couple things happened to him last year that I don't know could be duplicated. I mean, a foul ball at exactly the right speed and the right angle to break a clavicle through the pad. I mean, it hit the pad and still broke his clavicle. So I don't know. I'm not ready to call him injury prone, but to your point, Debbie, I would like them to limit the situations where things can happen to him. And by increasing his ability to be in the lineup and putting him other places, the natural byproduct of that is he's in less chance to get injured. So, I take those two as a whole. Yes, play him everywhere, play him all the time, keep him from being injured.
Yeah, and this is a crass way of putting it, but I'm just thinking of this old metaphor. If you step in a cow pie, then you probably just got to miss that cow pie moving forward. But if you keep stepping in cow pies, maybe walk in a different field. And that's kind of what happened to Tyler Stevenson last year. He kept playing catcher. He kept getting hurt. Let's try and play him at first. Let's try and play him at DH and keep that bat in the lineup. Keep him producing for the Reds because the Reds score more when he hits. It's proven. And then let's make sure that happens.
I want to see what you think about this. Our buddy Carrick Melvin checks in and says, if CES is on the team, then they can only have 2 catchers when Votto comes back. CES, Votto, and Steer will need to get at bats at DH. You said you could have CES and Votto at the same time. So who are you cutting? Like, who's the guy that goes? If you want to keep 3 catchers,
I think you keep 5 outfielders, right? 5 outfielders, 3 catchers.
Mm-hmm.
That's 8. Yeah. I think I did that right. Because then you have 5 infielders. Yeah. Let's go with that.
So
that's doing math. So it's a little bit. Yeah.
To your point, that's where I was going to go with it. Also, I think that Spencer Steer could become part of the right-handed platoon and get some of his at bats out.
You can play corner outfield
in a corner outfield. Exactly.
Yeah.
So you can use one of those infielders that can play outfield as well. And you can get rid of a Chad Pinder type. One of those dudes are going to make this team. You could get rid of one of those guys and use them in the platoon. It can be done. Listen, what a great problem to have. I'm sorry, folks. We have too much good talent. I don't know what we're going to do. We can't. I don't know.
Tyler Stevenson can play left field.
We're just too damn good. Oh, you saw his face when I said that during the interview, right?
He did not like that at all.
He did not like that at all. So, Carrick, I hear you. I mean, you're not wrong. It would require a lot of creativity, but that's the one thing that I think we all can agree that David Bell is good at is the creativity. This whole scenario, like David Bell is sitting in his office, like just maniacal right now. He's like, all the things I can do.
Right.
This is right in his wheelhouse.
As many people think to a fault, but no, this is what he loves. He loves tinkering with the lineup. He loves guys that are very flexible in their positions that they can play. And I think that he's going to get the best out of these guys. A lot of people like to complain about him moving dudes around, but we've got guys that can do that. Spencer Steer can play everywhere. I mean, probably not center field, probably not catcher, but he literally played shortstop in college.
My man, we played Jesse Winker in center field. Spencer Steer can play center field.
Exactly. Exactly. But at the end of the day, like, I think David Bell knows, like, he's got dudes that he can move around. He can kind of, it's a puzzle to him, and it's going to be a good puzzle now. Whereas the last like year and a half or so, it's been like, really? We're playing this guy here? All right. Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Nick. Thanks for putting this roster together for me. I guess we got to put this guy here.
TJ Friedel comment here. Reaper Card says TJ Friedel has to play pretty regularly the way he's hitting right now. Yeah, Friedel is making a case for some playing time. The interesting question here is where and how are you doing the platoons? Because Jake Fraley is going to play in a corner, left-handed. Mm-hmm. TJ Friedel is left-handed. So you want to say center field? No. Jeff's guy, the Hype Train Express, Will Benson, left-handed, playing center field. So what do you think? You want to say right field, right? Maybe. If you've got Will Myers playing first base during that time, then yes, TJ Friedel could be your right fielder and have an all lefty outfield versus a right-handed pitcher. I can see that. Once Joey's back and first base gets a little more crowded, interesting decisions to be made with how exactly you do those platoons out there.
TJ Friedel is just so interesting to me because he's not I think he's a kind of one-dimensional hitter. He's got a little bit more power than Alejo Lopez does, but he doesn't have that on-base ability. I feel like his on-base percentage is very dependent on his batting average, and that's fine. But last year he hit 240, and he did have an on-base of 310, but I don't know. I was just looking up those numbers to see. I'm like, what am I thinking about TJ Friedl? I still don't know about TJ Friedl. And maybe that means that he does deserve more playing time to prove to us who he is. But in this outfield, I just feel like there are some dudes that got a lot of talent, a lot of athleticism. And if you're talking about you got to play him over Will Benson or Jake Fraley, I have a hard time picking over those two guys, and he's not playing over Will Myers. So the hard part's going to be like, I think it probably comes down to Friedl or Benson for playing time. And that's going to be a tough one because Benson has shown a propensity to really be like a game changer.
And Friedl, at the end of the day, may just be a really good spare part for your lefty platoon when Fraley needs an extra day off or Benson needs an extra day off. Well, then you've got Friedl. You've got Friedl to use as a late inning replacement, pinch hitter kind of thing. That may be all that TJ Friedl gets this year. And, you know, he'd be a good one for that. So it'll be interesting to see exactly how that plays out. This next one's a fun one, Jeff. We're gonna drop back into some Hunter Greene conversation for just a second, but it's not what you think. Austin checks in and says, part of me really wants to see how much of his hitting skill that Hunter Greene has retained. Remember, he was a shortstop, Jeffrey. Once he's a dominant pitcher, maybe we could have our very own version of Shohei Ohtani. No, I don't want to mess with Hunter Greene.
That's been the biggest thing. Cause like, you know, we always talk about, you know, regrets with different prospects. We kind of feel like the Reds did a disservice to Jose Barrera. They did a disservice to Nick Senzel. I don't necessarily know that they did a disservice to Hunter Greene, but they decided early on in his minor league career that Hunter Greene was not going to be a multi-position player. He was going to be a pitcher, period. And I think from a fan's perspective, I'm bummed on that, but I get it because Shohei Ohtani up until last year was injury prone. And last year he stayed relatively healthy. I think he still hit the injury list for a couple of different reasons for short tenures, but the stress that is put on his body from being a DH and a pitcher is a lot. And every fifth day, there's a reason starters only pitch every fifth day. And I think that you've got to continue to keep Hunter Greene at that one spot because I know he can be elite as a pitcher. I don't necessarily know if he can be elite as a hitter. And I think that would be the only reason that you would say, okay, we're going to put you in the DH spot.
Calvin checks in and says, guys are bound to get hurt. Outside of the bullpen, at what position could the Reds be the most exposed if injuries mount again? I think the outfield is probably the answer to this because they went out and got Will Myers, but I mean, just look at it right now. Nick Senzel's still not back. We're not sure what we got with him. We got a bunch of lefties, but they can't really all play every day. The right-handed side of those platoons are guys that are, you know, outside of a platoon situation are not guys you want starting every day. So for me, they're 1 to 2 outfield injuries away from being in big trouble in the outfield, just like they were last year.
Because I do agree, the outfield. I mean, the outfield's we've called it the land of opportunity because we don't necessarily know who's going to take a hold. I'm very excited about Will Benson, but he's still got to prove it. He hasn't proved it just yet. I think to give another perspective, because this roster does have many shallow spots to it, is if Spencer Steer gets hurt, who plays third base? Like, I mean, maybe Kevin Newman does, but you're not excited about having his bat in the lineup every day. I mean, Pittsburgh wasn't excited about having his bat in the lineup every day. So I think that if you're looking outside of the outfield for being a detrimental position for injuries, third base is one that if Spencer Steer misses significant time, that might be an opportunity to call up some prospects, but I just that would be tough.
But they're all going to stay healthy. So that was all hypothetical. We're not doing. We are not. I am not learning 70 different players again this year. I won't do it, Jeff. I won't do it. My contract.
Yeah,
No,
you know,
I'm not doing it, Jeff.
just for depth purposes, they called Chase Anderson up to major league camp. So, you know, if there's some starters that get hurt, we could see Chase Anderson again.
Stop it. So, hey, Jeff, look,
That I'm
David's
gonna take
here. Look at David's here. For those that don't follow along in the YouTube comments throughout the week, David is the guy that was questioning Tyler Stevenson taking up 2 roster spots. He's the one that really got me thinking. And David says he's still not feeling it. He appreciates our takes, but if carrying 3 catchers made sense, every team would do it. The Reds overreacted to the injuries last year. So David, I hear you, and man, thanks for being so engaged all the time and watching every show and commenting. We appreciate you, man. Here's the thing. Every team doesn't have Tyler Stevenson. Every team's best bat is not a catcher. The Reds are in a unique situation that they have to act differently than other teams in order to keep their best lineup on the field. In this particular case, it's a catcher that they need to play every day. And in today's baseball, the guy can't catch every day. It just doesn't work that way anymore. You know, Yadi Molina, Yadi Molina was probably the last guy to do that. Okay. Whew,
and he wasn't that guy for the last couple of years of his career.
And he wasn't. Correct. Exactly. So for me, David, I mean, I think we'll agree to disagree. I understand where you're coming from with this, but I think the Reds are in a unique position that they can and need to do this in order to put their best product on the field every day.
I honestly think that the strength of this team is the catching position. And you could argue, you know, second base or wherever Jonathan India plays, but there's still questions on, you know, what does his defense look like now? It seems to be better in spring training, but what is better for Jonathan India, being that he was -9 in outs above average last year? Is better still negative? Then there's a whole different conversation there. I think the best position on this roster outside of your top 3 starters is catcher. And that's not going to be a thing. Like Luke Maile and Kurt Casale are valuable parts of this team and could be valuable parts of other teams as well. I mean, the Guardians gave Luke Maile plenty of time at catcher last year, and Kurt Casale was a big part of that Mariners playoff team. So I look at this and I say, I am intrigued and I'm excited to see how 3 catchers really gets Tyler Stevenson in the lineup every day and helps this team to win more games.
Well, Jeff, we have a couple suggestions for ways to increase attendance that I'm going to roll with here. And we won't spend too much time on this, but they're fun. Calvin says dollar beer night. Listen, there's reports out there already that Cincinnati per capita drinks more beer at sporting events than almost anywhere else in the country. They were pretty high on that list. Yeah, they were right. They were in like the top 3 or 4 for sure.
I think it was like Milwaukee. Was Milwaukee number 1?
Here's my point. I don't think they could have enough beer at Great American Ballpark if they did this. Dollar beer night. Are you kidding me? I wouldn't see the game. I mean, I guess now that the games are only going to be 2.5 hours, you could get away with this. But I go back to dollar beer night and bat night being the same night in Chicago one night at a White Sox game, and police having to escort players off the field. I mean, I don't know. Cincinnati usually behaves better than that, but I don't know that they could stock enough beer to pull off dollar beer night in this town.
I don't think so.
And the other one, Jeff, this one I know you'd be in on, I think. Austin says pie Castellini night. I know where I'm going to go.
Yeah.
Where are you going to go?
Yeah. That'd be interesting, because that also, I mean, that harkens back to and I'm blanking. I know somebody in the comments section will remember, but I'm blanking on what it was that led him to do this. But remember when Marty shaved his head, and that was like
there was a cancer thing. There was a cancer kid. He did that in solidarity with a child that had been diagnosed with cancer.
There was a lot of folks at that game. Like, I think everybody knows, like, there's a little bit of extracurricular that you could tap into with your team and with your broadcasting crew and things like that, that could be a little bit of a draw. I mean, obviously you can't shave your head every other night, but you know.
Hey, Nick, I know you're listening. Go tell Phil pie Castellini night. Could be a ticket package. I'm telling you. JY checks in. The starters, both position players and pitchers, are looking good, but the bullpen looks scary. It's only spring training. What are our thoughts? Well, I hope you listened to Lucas Sims in yesterday, right?
Yeah.
The week's a blur. Yesterday's episode, Lucas Sims was on. If you haven't watched that or listened to it yet, jump back. Lucas Sims dropped in right after he got home from work. So we got to talk to him, and he had a lot of good things to say about this bullpen. I kind of agree with him. I think that some of it hinges on the return of Tony Santillan. Some of it hinges on how they use Luis Cessa. But with Sims back in the bullpen, I think Alexis Diaz picks up right where he left off. If Tony Santillan is healthy, he was a whole different guy in the bullpen, and I look forward to having him back. Now, that's 3 great arms on the back end of it. You fill those middle innings with guys like Connor Overton, maybe. We've talked about that. If Cessa's your long man in there, then, this bullpen is not bad. Now, it could be exposed by injury to that previous question where, they said I couldn't talk about the bullpen. Well, here now we are. The bullpen is the spot that is least able to absorb injury. Whatever guys they open with, those are going to be their best bullpen arms. And then there's not a lot cooking down in Louisville waiting to replace them if somebody gets hurt.
I'm just slightly, I'm going to push back on that just a little bit, because I think what's going to happen is you're going to see a bullpen of mostly veteran guys. You got Buck Farmer, you got Luis Cessa, you got Connor Overton that are going to be the middle guys that start on opening day. If some of those guys go down to injury, I am intrigued on seeing what Ricky Karcher can do. I'm intrigued to see what some of these young dudes can do. Kyle Legumina, the guys that we've gotten in trades that aren't being reported about because, a prospect who is a bullpen arm is usually a failed starter. So people kind of have a negative opinion of them anyway. But the bullpen is one where prospects are hard to project, because usually they end up there because they are not going to work out as a starter, or because they just haven't quite figured out the whole stamina thing. They get to the second and third innings and they kind of fall apart. So people start to kind of forget about them. But there's guys that have come up through bullpens that have absolutely exploded that nobody saw coming. And I think that it's going to be interesting to see when you give these guys who haven't had that exposure to the major leagues just yet, when you give them their first opportunity, what's going to happen. Because Ricky Karcher has a profile of a relief pitcher that I really want to see. And I don't necessarily know that he's going to be on the opening day bullpen, but when he gets called up, could be fun to watch.
Jeff, there are a ton of folks on live right now with us. If this is your first time watching us live, make sure you click subscribe and the notification bell. We go live on Fridays right now until the season starts. We have an episode for you every single day. So if it's your first time here, welcome. Glad to have you. Make sure you're subscribed. We want to have you around all the time to talk Reds baseball with us. Jeff, Tyler checks in and says Overton hasn't looked great, but he's high on him. He wants to see him as part of the 5-man rotation, or at least a few looks at him at the beginning. He looked great when healthy last year. That leads me to this. You knew I was going to talk about it eventually. A 6-man rotation. What if the 5th starter is an interchangeable part at the beginning and we get a few looks at Overton, we get a few looks at Stout, we get a few looks at Williamson, and we wait for somebody to kind of just settle in and take the job?
I could see that, because this season is about figuring out who you got, figuring out who is going to be here when the team is good again. And if you're telling me that you can kind of give rest to Hunter Greene, Nick Lodolo, and Graham Ashcraft, maybe give them one more day in between starts, while also establishing that goal of figuring out who you've got, then I think that's probably the best thing. And especially when we're talking about a bullpen where the guys that we trust, that list is very small, probably best to not be full of a bunch of bullpen guys that we're not really sure about. I mean, God help us if Hunter Strickland makes the opening day bullpen. If we're talking about Hunter Strickland or a 6th starter, give me a 6th starter every day of the week and twice on Sunday.
Our buddy Carrick has made his prediction, Jeff. He thinks that is going to be Cessa and Weaver, 4th and 5th. I don't know. I think I think Sessa being at the World Baseball Classic hurts his chance to fight his way into this rotation. No matter what Mexico does with him,
are they going to use him?
I don't know. I think
Still haven't seen anything about it.
I still don't know, but whether they use him as a starter or not, I think him not being in camp with the Reds coaches, competing with these players against major leaguers, is going to hurt him.
I think some things that David Bell has said leads me to believe they're monitoring their guys very closely on their World Baseball Classic teams. They're like, okay, how are they being used? What's their training regimen look like between games and stuff like that? So I don't necessarily think being away from the team will hurt them so much. It's just, how does Mexico use him? Because if Mexico uses him as a 1 to 2 inning guy, it's going to be hard for him to build up that arm strength before opening day to be a starter.
Let's take a few more, Jeff. We've run past the hour mark here, but I do want to take a few more.
Love it.
This chat is blowing up. Scott Campbell, our buddy Scott up in Dayton. Scott, how are you? Someone should challenge Jeff to eat an entire fry box in a half inning against the pitch clock. We're doing this, guys. All right, here you go.
No.
We're going to do this. I'm in Cincinnati for the whole first weekend series of the season. On Saturday or Sunday, Jeff and I are going to do this. We're going to have the pitch clock in the frame, and Jeff is going to crush not only a fry box, we're going to see how much fry box he can eat in a half inning. Before this, I'll run a poll. We'll take the bets. We'll see we'll set an over under. We'll set an over under. We're doing this, Jeff. It's happening. It's happening.
Sure.
No. We're doing it.
I'm pretty sure Hunter Greene went like 90 seconds the other day, going 1, 2, 3 on the Cubs.
Oh, I can't wait for this. We're gonna do it. It's gonna be
and the
great.
Pirates. No, but the Pirates were the ones that Wandy Peralta got 3 outs in 20 seconds.
Dude, you're gonna have to go. We're gonna have to see how many. We're gonna do it. This is happening.
This is happening.
Another comment. Jared on Vinyl says that we can add Joey Votto to the list of players Jeff hates. Jeff hates Jonathan India. Jeff hates Joey Votto. Gave his job away already.
I don't hate anybody except Hunter Strickland.
Branch Brown checks in, says he thinks you're right, Jeff, about Williamson breaking camp in the rotation. They want to give him that job. Yeah. The Reds want him to be the 5th starter. It makes first off, if he can be the 5th starter and be successful, I mean, wow. Just the ability to talk about the trades from last season and who won the trades and
starting to already pay off.
It's all, yeah.
And he was the key piece in that deal. I know that, Nick Kroll really talked about Connor Phillips and that he was the player to be named later, but Connor Phillips was second on that list. Brandon Williamson was first. And there were some thoughts. They're like, okay, what's going to happen? And then, his walk percentage last year in AAA really started to sour some people on his star, but I really think that he's got a shot to be the type of dude that could be the 3rd starter. Like, I think his ceiling is higher than Graham Ashcraft's. It's just right now his floor is also pretty low, and we got to figure out exactly where he falls. Larry
Keller says Gutierrez in the bullpen. I don't think we're going to see Gutierrez this season.
Larry's right, though. If we do see him, it's in
if we do, it's in the bullpen. But
September probably, but
maybe they would. I think they would have to be in big trouble. I think if the bullpen is pitching well in the last months of the season, I don't know why. I don't know why you would rush him back like that. I could totally just bring him along slow. If you really want to see him in some in-game action near the end, send him down to AAA where it's not quite as aggressive, I guess, because you know how these guys are pro athletes. You put them in the major leagues in a competitive situation and they're going to go hard. And I don't know that we want to do that. I mean, why not? If we have the luxury of bring him along slowly and have him set for, being a valuable piece of the bullpen in 2024.
I've seen some different questions and stuff like that in our comment section over the last few weeks. Like a couple of people being like, hey, what's up with Gutierrez and stuff like that. The Tommy John surgery is going to keep him out until at the very best. We're talking like the end of August, maybe September. And that's if everything goes right in his rehab. That's if he has no setbacks, nothing crops up during his time when he's ramping up, and he's not going to have enough time to ramp up as a starter. So I think the best course for him, the best plan for Vladimir Gutierrez this year is that when he's ready to come back, they send him to Louisville and they have him pitch as a starter, and he works himself up, gets himself ready for next year. I don't think there's any scenario that is best for him personally where he pitches in Cincinnati this year.
All right, 2 more and we're getting out of here, Jeff. But I want to talk about this guy. The RoboBuck says he thinks Bennett Souza, left-handed relief pitcher, starts in Louisville, and I think maybe he's one of 2 people still competing to be the second lefty in the bullpen at the major league level.
It's funny because I asked Bobby this the other day, and I'm like, what do you think about the second lefty in the bullpen? Because so far we've not really seen anybody that's been inspiring. And he answered back, and he's just like, do they need 2 lefties? It's like, with as much as we've seen with the guys that we've seen in camp so far, I don't want to see a second lefty. Like, I understand the good makeup of a baseball team.
You gotta have 2 lefties.
You have to have multiple lefties. But if the options are what we've seen, are we really going to force that?
Yes. You got to have 2 lefties,
man. Like,
you got to have 2 lefties. They have to find a second lefty, Jeff. If it's not these guys, then they have to go get somebody off the waiver wires at the end of spring training. But there has to be a second left-handed pitcher in this bullpen. It cannot just be Reaver San Martin. They cannot open the season with just him as the lefty in the bullpen. And I'm busy. I'm not available.
Let me see. Okay. Now you should know this guy. So I'm interested to see if you know him. But who was the second lefty? Obviously, Aroldis Chapman closed. But in 2012, when the Reds were division champs,
oh my God,
who was the second lefty?
Oh, I don't know.
Actually
Jeff.
pitched super well.
Tell me who it is, because it's too long ago for me to remember.
It's the one year that this guy proved any kind of valuable for the Reds, because the Reds traded Travis Wood to the Chicago Cubs to get this guy, Sean Marshall.
Sean Marshall. He was really good. I remember that now.
He was really, really good. So I agree with you. A playoff
you
team
need
has
2
lefties.
lefties. You need 2 lefties to make the playoffs.
They're not making the playoffs this year.
Oh my God. All right, one more. BR7 has a good one, because I've made this same observation, and I think you have too, Jeff. Benson beating out that infield hit, hustling down the line to first, clapping his hands when he was safe. It was good to see that. Benson, Friedel, India, McLean, they're all really hustling. Love it. I love it too. And I think that energy, listen, I don't know that we've given him enough credit thus far through spring, but I think Jonathan India really set the tone at the beginning of camp, talking about the changes that he made, the fact that he sees himself being one of the team leaders of this team, and then going out and playing that way. Well, all these young guys in camp are, if Jonathan's doing it, I better do it too. And, that's leadership. And I'm glad to see it.
Well, the young guys are playing that way, but also yesterday, and I mentioned this play already, the Trey Mancini infield single dude is like, I was listening to the radio on that. Tommy Thrall called that play like he was surprised to see what he saw, because it was a dribbler, no man's land down the third base line, no chance for the third baseman to run up and grab it. So Hunter Greene is lunging off the mound, going as hard as he can to try and barehand that ball, throw it over to first. And according to the radio crew, he missed it by like that much, like almost had him. But the tone of voice told me is that there was no way Hunter Greene should try to make that play. He was never going to get him out. That is just another example of the hustle that the Reds are showing right now in spring training. The fact that Hunter Greene, who knows he's on this roster and probably knew before that game yesterday that he was going to be the opening day starter, is just like, let me grab this little dribbler here and throw Trey Mancini out when absolutely no one expects me to do it. That's the kind of thing that's getting me fired up, and why I took that Reds to win 80+ games thing on FanDuel.
Oh boy. Oh boy. Scott Campbell, by the way, had Sean Marshall. He got it. Good job, Scott.
Yep.
And we're going to end with this. What is my walkout music? Well,
Brown Eyed Girl.
It's if it has to be right now, like me right now, I'm going with Toby Keith. I ain't as good as I once was. That's going to be my walkout music. And on that note, that's where we're going to end it today. Jeffrey, take us home.
Thanks, everybody, for joining in on today's live Aloha edition of the podcast. Thank you so much for everyone who dropped a question, dropped a comment into our comment section. I know there's a ton that we didn't get to, but thank you all so much for being a part of our show. Now, make sure you go check out Locked On Fantasy Baseball, because Matt and Dom are going to help you win your league. They've got the best fantasy draft strategies for you to help get that dub. So check out Locked On Fantasy Baseball. It's just like Locked On Reds. It's free and available on all platforms, including right here on YouTube. Coming up next week, we're going to talk about the time that the Reds almost got Babe Ruth. In fact, there was actually 2 times that the Reds almost got Babe Ruth. So yeah, going back into the history books. Plus, we're also going to keep you up to date on everything that's happened all weekend long out in Cactus League play for your Red Legs. Thanks again, everybody, because as we move through spring training, we're less than 3 weeks away from opening day. We're going to keep y'all locked on Reds every single day.
Jeff hates Joey and Jonathan. What a hashtag.
I don't.